Hey YouTube, Ed here with Jack of All Trades and welcome to another video. So today we're going to do a little project. We're going to install a horn and turn signals on my ATV. I'm doing that because here in my hometown it is legal for me to operate an ATV on public roads as long as I comply with all the rules of the road like any other vehicle, and that my ATV is equipped properly as per the rules to operate safely on a public road. With that, let's go ahead and let's get this project started. Stay tuned. We're going to equip this Tracker 600 ATV with turn signals and a horn. Welcome back. So before we get into this project, I have to say that I am doing this on my machine because it is legal for me to operate an ATV on public roadways where I live. That doesn't necessarily mean that the same laws apply to you and where you live. So before you go do this and expect that you are going to be legal in your local municipality, you need to check with the laws and regulations in your area to make sure that regardless of what equipment you have, it is actually legal for you to operate an ATV on public roads. There are cities out there that do not allow it. In fact, I have a neighboring city right next to me here that just because it's legal in my city, in their city, it is not. You cannot drive an ATV on public roadways. So just make sure before you go ahead and spend the time and the money to do this, that it's actually going to be useful for you and that you can actually operate an ATV on public roads. All right, so let's go over the things that I had to buy to do this project. Obviously, I had to have some butt connectors. You're going to need some red primary wire and some black primary wire. I'm using 14 gauge for this. This should suffice for everything I need it to do. The turn signals themselves, I got these on Amazon. They're made by a company called Kinstex. They are an LED directional chevron light. I will put a link to the description or a link to the Amazon order for those into the description. Here's the actual light themselves. They're LED. They're very bright. They're flexible. They're actually designed for a motorcycle, so I figured there's no reason why they shouldn't work for an ATV. You're also going to need a turn signal switch. Again, I bought this on Amazon. It is actually backlit with an LED so that when you activate the turn signal, it lights up and it lets you know that your turn signal is activated. The company that provides the lights or that makes the lights say you need to have an LED flasher. The horn I'm going to use is a Wallow Bad Boy. This thing is loud. It's a model 419 air horn. It's actually got a little air pump right here, and that air pump activates a dual horn. Each one of these silver parts on the horn is actually the horn diaphragm, and it's got two outlets for dual tone air horn, and it is stupid loud. I also bought a horn wiring kit from the same company, Wallow. It comes with the button, the harness, the relay plug, the ground wire. It's supposed to be pretty much everything you need to wire in the horn. Now, I've used these wiring kits before on various things like for trailers and whatnot, and they always say everything you need, but then you always need to end up adding something later, so be prepared for that. Comes with a fuse holder. Looks like it comes with enough wire, so we'll see how it works out. But that's the basic equipment to install turn signals and a horn on this machine. Let's get started with the install. I am going to actually mount this air horn somewhere up in here. Now I've got a nice heavy piece of steel right here, and it just seems like a really nice solid piece to mount this. Now they do have a mounting point here for this horn, so I'm going to have to make some kind of a bracket that I can mount to this steel cross member. But this is where I'm going to mount the horn. I figure it'll be fairly out of the weather here. It'll be covered up by plastics for the most part. I'm not going to be driving this thing in the rain, but this ATV does see a trail every now and again, and when that happens, obviously you can find some water and some mud. But hopefully up in this area it should be fairly well protected. So let's go ahead and let's come up with a bracket to mount this air horn. All right, so mounting this doesn't have to be anything too terribly complicated. It doesn't look like. It looks like I just need to get a piece of steel and extend it down below the frame here so I can actually mount the air horn bracket to the piece of steel, and it should go fairly well. Now I've got a carriage bolt here that obviously isn't going to fit into the slot here, so I'm going to have to take the grinder and I'm going to do a little grinding and I'm going to modify that carriage bolt, but that carriage bolt is actually what I'm going to use to mount it here. And I will probably do something similar to mount the piece of steel to the top of the frame here, so I've got a good solid mounting surface on it, but this doesn't look like it needs to be anything too terribly complicated. All right, so I've gone ahead and I've squared off that carriage bolt, and as you can see, it fits right up into the mount, right like it should. So that's what we're going to use to mount that to the piece of steel. And there we go. It's mounted and ready to be wired in. All right, now that I got the horn mounted, I got to figure out a place to put these turn signals, and I think I'm going to put them, I'm going to inset them in here with the headlight. Just if they're kind of set back that way, and then they'll be kind of protected a little bit. The problem is I'm going to have to build a bracket, because if I just drill a hole on the side of the plastic here and mount them right to the plastic, it's angled and the turn signal will be kicked way out, and it won't be flat with the headlight. So I'm gonna have to build a little mounting bracket right here. All right, so I got my bracket made, painted, and drilled, and it's ready to get installed on the plastic. So I've got a stainless steel locking nut, bolt, and a washer. So to install it, we got to take the nut, of course, feed the wires through the nut for the turn signal, and through the hole we just drilled. So now we'll go ahead and install the other side. All right, so you can see both the lights are installed. So we're good to go there. Let's continue on to the next step. Okay, so I need to mount the horn button. Now I'm really running out of dash space on this machine. There's just not a whole lot of space on the dash, and I really don't have any room anywhere on the handlebars to mount a horn. Everything is so compacted in here. There's just not a lot of room. So I had to come up with a spot to mount the horn. Well, this glove box they give you here, it's really not good for much. All I usually do is throw in a pair of riding gloves and maybe my insurance and title information, but that's usually all that goes into that glove box. So I decided I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to actually mount my horn and my turn signal switch in the glove box cover, just because there's not really any other good use for this compartment. And why not? It gives me extra dash space here. If I need to ever change those switches out, it'll be easy access. And I've also got easy access through the bottom of the compartment to run the wiring. So this was my decision. So I went ahead and I cut a hole, and that hole fits the horn switch perfectly. And you can see here, I've already added some wires to the horn switch. It's all wired up and ready to go. So that all I have to do is put this horn switch in, rivet it into place, and it'll be a complete install except for actually wiring in the wires. So there we have the horn button installed. Now we're going to go ahead and we're just going to do the same thing over here for the actual turn signal switch. All right, so I've got these brackets. I just made these out of a piece of angle iron. It's got two holes in it that I can pop rivet right to the fender. So I'm just going to use rivets. We mount these brackets right here on the fender, one on each side, and that'll be a really good spot to mount my tail lights. They should be fairly well protected, and they'll be in a visible enough area where they'll actually do their job. All right, so we're going to go ahead and pop rivet this bracket on. Now I'm going to use these rivet washers. These washers are exactly the right size they need to be to fit over these pop rivets. And you actually need to use these when you're pop riveting to plastic. Otherwise, when you run the pop rivet, it'll just expand the plastic and it won't actually hold, and eventually it'll just come out. So anytime you use a pop rivet on plastic, you have to make sure that you use these rivet washers on the back side. So you go ahead and just install the pop rivet there and put the washer on the back side, on the blind side, and then go ahead and run the pop rivet, and it should hold just fine. Alright, so that's basically where the turn signal is going to sit. Now I got to have a place for the wire to run through the fender, so I'm just going to take my drill and I'm just going to drill a hole not too close. If you run it too close to the end of the turn signal, you'll have too hard of a turn for the wire and you could possibly break the wire over time. So you just make the hole just big, just far enough away so that you can feed the wires through and not make too sharp of a turn. Just like that. The turn signal is basically installed other than the wiring. So let's go ahead and let's do the other side. And there we go. We've got the tail lights installed. Now we have to go into the wiring and start wiring everything up. All right, so the first thing we're going to wire up on this thing is the horn. No particular reason. That's just going to be the first one I wire up. Now, when you buy the wiring, horn wiring kit, you actually get a wiring diagram in the kit. You can go ahead and pause this. You can use whatever you want in here, but you do get it with the instructions. Okay, I've got my multimeter hooked up to the negative side of the battery, and I'm on the setting to check conduction. So we're just going to go ahead and hook this up, and we should hear a tone when we hook it up. And we do hear a tone. That means we have continuity between this screw head and the negative side of the battery, so I know that is a good ground. So now that I've verified I've got a good ground on that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hook the ground connecting wire up to the self-tapping screw and go ahead and run it in. All right, I'm a really big fan of these heat shrink style connectors. The other ones are fine, but they seem to be a little more temporary. These heat shrink style connectors really make a good seal. They're a little more expensive, but in my opinion, they are well worth the money long term to make sure that you've got a good watertight connection between the wire and the connector itself. There, we've got our ground wire connected. We'll go ahead and we'll zip tie this up later. All right, so we got the side panel off here. We're going to go ahead and wire up the horn. The first thing you got to do anytime you're messing around with a battery is make sure you disconnect the negative side or the ground. You don't want to be messing around with the positive side of the battery unless you are sure that the negative side is disconnected first. Otherwise, it might be a shocking experience. Or now all I'm going to do is take the positive side. I'm just going to loosen it up. I'm not going to disconnect it completely. I've got the fuse side of my wire for my horn switch. I'm going to go ahead and just stick this on here like that and snug it back down again. Got a good connection there. So this is the positive side of the horn circuit. You can see here is my fuse. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to just leave my fuse or zip tie my fuse to this harness here, which also happens to be the harness for my winch. And I'm just going to route the wire all the way around back up to the front here. All right, so you can see down there in the corner of the glove box, I've gone ahead and drilled a small hole, and I ran the 2 wires from the horn switch down through that hole in the corner of the glove box. And both those wires come out down here underneath the cowlings. This wire here, which has got a black wire tied to it's got to go to the negative terminal of the battery. This wire right here has got to go to the gray wire, which goes to the relay, which I've got mounted up there underneath the front fender. So let's go ahead and get the negative wire hooked up. Let's get the gray wire tied into the other side of the switch, and that should pretty much complete the horn installation. And just to finish up the install, I added a couple of zip ties just to hold the wire for the horn switch. So then as I close the compartment and open it again, the wires are not in the way. Everything's nice and clean. All right, so we got the horn all buttoned up and ready to go. I've gone ahead and I've put the front clip back onto the ATV since the lights are already mounted and I can reach all the wires. Now we just have to wire the turn signal switch, and we have to wire in the lights and get all that working, and then it should be done. All right, so here's the electrical schematic I made up. Now you can see I put the picture of the actual back of the switch off of the Amazon site right here. And it shows that terminal number 4 is a ground. Terminal number 3 is to the right turn signals. Terminal number 2 goes to the LED flasher, and terminal number 1 goes to the left turn signals. The LED flasher goes to the positive battery post, and of course all the grounds get tied into ground. So that's the basic electrical schematic that I'm going to follow, and that's how I'm going to wire this thing up. All right, so here we've got our flasher, and the flasher's got a neat little clip on it, which just really conveniently happens to clip on top of the, clip very nicely on the battery hold down. So that's where I clipped it. So I came off of my positive battery terminal, and this post right here is my battery post on the flasher. So we're gonna go ahead and connect that. And I've got the ground disconnected, so we're safe. So that's power for our battery. This wire right here is what's going to go up to the switch, so that is our load. And I'm going to go ahead and connect that to the flasher as well. And the flasher is connected. All right, so here's my switch right here. Here's the wire that comes off of my flasher, which needs to go to that terminal right there. It's the one in the middle. I believe that's labeled terminal number 2. That's where that's going to get connected to. So I need to put a spade connector on this wire. You go ahead and just connect it to terminal number 2 on your battery or on your turn signal switch. Okay, rather than have you watch me strip and crimp a bunch of wire, I took the liberty and went ahead and I cut 2 long pieces of red wire. They're about 18 inches long. The first one is going to go to terminal number 3. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take a Sharpie marker, and I'm just going to mark this wire with a black line. So that way when I shove it down through the hole, I know which one is for the right and which one is for the left. So I'm going to go ahead and send that down the hole I drilled. We're going to take the other wire that I crimped on, put it on terminal number 1. That's for the left. I'm going to shove that down the hole as well. I also need a ground wire for the switch because this switch is lighted, so I again took the liberty of doing a ground wire so you didn't have to watch. Plug that in and send that down the hole as well. So all my wires for my switch are now connected up and in place. So here are my 3 wires. I have my ground, my 2 reds, the 1 red wire marked with black ink, so I know that that's the right turn signal. So all 3 of those wires are right here. Now right here I've got a frame bolt, and I did check this bolt against my battery ground, and this is a good ground connection. I went ahead and I used a fork terminal on there, and I put a pigtail with 3 ground wires on there so I can run several grounds to this and have a common ground for all 3 of them. So the first thing I'm going to hook up to the ground is my ground wire for my switch, and I'm going to hook that up right there. These 2 will save for the 2 turn signals or circuits. All right, here's the wires for my left side front turn signal, and these are all going to be the same. So I'm not going to sit here and show you how to do all 4 of them. I'm not going to insult your intelligence. I'm just going to show you one. So I've got a red one, which is my ground or positive, and a black one, which is my ground. So we're going to do the red first. We have to strip off a lot of insulation here, and we have to do that because these wires are considerably smaller than the gauge wire that we're using, or the primary wire that we're using to wire the rest of the machine. So I stripped off a lot, and then I'm going to basically fold it over so that it doubles, pinch it together, and then take the wire with the butt connector that I'm going to use, slide it on there, and then crimp it down. You kind of have to double that wire because it's so small and it's so fine that there's just nothing for the crimper to grab onto when you crimp it down. And then just make sure you really cinch it down good and tight. Give it a little bit of a tug, not too hard. It's in there good. I'm going to go ahead and heat shrink it on here. And there we go. I've got a good electrical connection. Now I pulled enough wire here so that I can route it along the frame here and back over to my turn signal wire, which it needs to be able to get to. Now I need to do the exact same thing for the ground to go back to that pigtail ground that I showed you earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and do all that off camera, but that's basically, I'm doing a butt connector with the heat shrink connectors to make it a good seal, and then I'll go ahead and I will zip tie it to the frame in multiple places so that it stays nice and captive and it doesn't have any rubbing issues. So let's go ahead and get the rest of this completed. All right, so I've got the wire from the switch and the wire coming from the right or the front left turn signal light pigtailed together in one spade connector. I've got the rear turn signal light connected to one male spade connector, and I've got a piece of heat shrink here. I'm going to go ahead and slip the heat shrink over, slide these 2 together, and then heat shrink over that bare metal connection so there's no chance that anything will connect to ground by accident. So that connection is heat shrunk together. I'm going to do the exact same thing with the grounds and one of the ground wires on this pigtail set. So we're going to do that, and then this whole left side of the turn signal should be wired and ready to go. All right, so I got everything all wired together here, and I need to let you know something. Amazon's picture is wrong. It came out completely wrong. I had the right turn signals coming off of terminal 3 and the left turn signals coming off of terminal 1, and when I turned on the switch, the turn signals were exactly backwards. So at least it was an easy fix. I just had to swap 1 and 3 around. Turn signals came out right, but just be known the picture in Amazon, it does appear to be wrong. because I know I had the wires going right and left as they specified, and that's not the way it came out. So at any rate, the turn signals now work, and let's take a look at them. All right, so we're looking at the front turn signals here. That is right. That is left. And now we're looking at the rear turn signals. That is right. And that is left. All right, so one other thing that I need to tell you about that I did differently is I did remove the LED flasher. There is no flasher in this machine, and you can obviously see the LEDs are working as they're supposed to. I don't know why the flashers themselves, if you read on the Amazon description, very specifically say you do need to put an LED flasher on there. But then when I wired it up with the LED flasher, it acted all weird. It was half flashing the lights sometimes. It was doing some very strange things. And so then I started the machine up thinking maybe my battery was low and that was what was causing it. That didn't make a difference. I unplugged the flasher and I connected them direct, and they are working as you just saw. So everything is working the way it is, and currently right now I am not using the LED flasher. All I've got is the LED turn signals and the switch, and that's it. That's all I'm using. So maybe I'm going to burn my lights out, maybe not, but they were not working with the flasher that I purchased. All that being said, it's working now. Let's go ahead and let's take a quick look at some of the tools that I used to get this project done, and then let's wrap this video up. All right, some of the tools I used for this project, I used a drill, a couple of impact drivers, various drill bits and stuff. I'm not going to go through all those specifically. The Fluke multimeter did prove to be very useful. I used a long-handled Phillips screwdriver, a long-handled straight screwdriver. I had a what is this? It is a T25 screwdriver. T25 torque screwdriver, and then I also had a T25 bit on a 1/4 inch adapter for my impact gun. I used that. A 3/8 drive ratchet, a 1/4 inch drive short handled ratchet, a 1/4 inch drive 6-inch long extension and universal joint. I used a 7/16 wrench, a 14 millimeter. Both of these are combination wrenches. I used a 13 millimeter deep well socket, a 1/2 inch deep well socket, and a 7/16 deep well socket, all in 3/8 drive. I used an 8 millimeter 1/4 inch drive socket. I used a screwdriver bit extension that was useful once. I used a side cutters, a electrical connection crimping tool, a wire strippers. I had to use some razor blades to cut some packages open. I had an 1.5 inch hole saw. I used that to cut the hole for the horn switch, and then I actually had to make it a little bit bigger, and I used a Dremel tool to do that. The Dremel tool is not pictured. I used a step drill. This step drill happens to go up to, I believe, 1/2 inch. Yes, it does. It goes up to a 1/2 inch. I had 14 gauge red and black primary wire, another Phillips head screwdriver, a smaller flat tip screwdriver. I also used a 11/32 combination wrench. I used a variety pack of electrical connectors, some heat shrink electrical butt connectors, some heat shrink electrical female and male spade connectors, and a multi-pack of heat shrink tubing. These are all the things that I use today, not to include actually the lights that I purchased on Amazon, and of course the switch and everything else. So that's basically all the stuff that I use today. Over the course of the last 3.5, 4 hours it took me to do this project, but you have to take into account the fact that I was videoing everything, moving the camera, making sure that I got as best camera angle as I possibly could, and things of that effect. So reasonably, you could probably get this done in about 3 hours without too much trouble if you are mechanically and electrically inclined. If you are not, you might want to set aside the better part of a day just so you can take your time and make sure you do it correctly. And there you have it, turn signals and a horn installed on my ATV. Now, grant you this is a Tracker 600 ATV, but there's not going to be a whole lot of differences in the way you do this project going from one ATV to the next, because they all basically have the same things. You all have a battery, they've all got fenders, and there's not a whole lot of differences other than in the aesthetics and the way it looks. So really this could work for pretty much any ATV that you're going to do it on. Now again, before you go taking the time and expecting this to be legal in your local area, make sure you check your laws and make sure it is legal for you to operate an ATV on public roads before you go doing this and expecting your machine to be legal. Everything I use today will be on my Amazon influencer store. I will put all the stuff that I purchased on Amazon in the links below so that you can buy it from Amazon. If you use those description links, the channel does get a little bit of a kickback, and I would very much appreciate that. It helps me to purchase things like this so that I can continue to do projects like this. Speaking of which, if there's any other projects that you want to see done, things like this that you watch today, please let me know in the comments and I'll see if I can get it done. If I've got the capability and the means to do it, I'll certainly give it a try. With that, if you like what you're seeing on this channel and you like the Jack of All Trades channel, you'd be doing me a huge favor by hitting that like and subscribe button down below. Make sure you ring that notification bell so that you get notified of upcoming videos. And please hit me with the thumbs ups, the comments, even some thumbs downs. If you think I'm doing something wrong, please let me know. I try to be as accurate and as thorough as possible, but I am human and sometimes I make mistakes. With that, this is Ed with Jack of All Trades. As always, thank you for riding along. Thank you for stopping by, and we will see you on the next video.